In my devotional with you today, I want us to think a moment together about the idea of laughter. And what role does laughter play in our journey of faith? I remember for years I went to California with a group of my clergy buddies to a great pastors' conference there that took place every January. It was an annual event to get to go out there. Beautiful campus, huge facility with lots of areas to walk around, beautifully manicured with the flowers and the greenery that were native to that area of the California near coast. It wasn't right on the coast, but it was near the coast. And one of the things that was added to that campus over the years was sculpture, big life-size sculptures of great biblical characters. Moses receiving the Ten Commandments. Saul on the Damascus Road when his life was so convicted and the transformation process began. Jesus as the Good Shepherd. But the most talked about sculpture on the entire campus that made world headlines, and I don't remember who the sculptor or the artist was, but it was referred to as the Smiling Jesus. I have a picture on my screen here behind us of a big happy picture of Jesus. We don't see him happy a lot. He was so burdened and had such a deep conviction, a deep purpose in his life. But we know he had to have laughed. What about being with Mary and Martha, those women that he shared such an intimate and loving relationship with? You know they had fun. You know that he had fun in many occasions that may not have been recorded because fun did not seem to be his basic purpose. Did Jesus laugh? Luke and Matthew, the Gospels, refer to the Beatitudes, which have their roots in the Hebrew Scriptures. And in the Lucan version, verse 21, "Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be satisfied." The Beatitudes, that list of contrasts. And 21b, or the second verse in the chapter, says, "Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh." Matthew has a different version of that, but it points to the fact that Jesus recognized the importance of laughter. And I have an idea he laughed as well. And I want us to think about that today. Can I tell you how precious laughter has been in my journey of life? I remember as a young man watching an old Jackie Gleason episode of the Honeymooners, which even in my younger days were in black and white reruns. They were recorded in the 1950s on a stage in a theater in New York City. Probably the first ever so-called sitcom our American culture ever knew. Jackie Gleason, Art Carney, Audrey Meadows, Joyce Randolph. And it was about Ralph getting upset at his mother-in-law. And it was a scene that has been shown through generations ever since, where he kind of loses it and calls her a blabbermouth. I've got a t-shirt at home. I should have worn that for this episode that characterizes that. It's been digitized in recent years where political figures appear in the place of the mother-in-law, which adds a great comedic side to it. Unless you like that politician, then of course you get offended by it. But laughter, it can be such a therapeutic part of our journey of life. Sometimes it comes at people's expense, and that can be hard. Sometimes humor has taken a very smart-aleck, harsh aspect in our culture. But I'm talking about just the good old-fashioned laughter, where we laugh at ourselves, and if we laugh at each other, we're not laughing at, but laughing with. And laughing about things that you can't choreograph and can't script in life that just remind us that maybe our mysterious Creator Yahweh revealed in Christ had and has and will have a sense of humor himself. I want to finish today by telling you a funny story, which I hope can spur this theme of laughter, especially during this time of adjustment and at times tension with economic and human health issues. We've talked in our church that communion is going to have to change. No longer are we going to have the bread that is broken and placed in your hand where you dip it in the chalice. For sanitation reasons, we're going to use the covered trays that have the individual cups, even have a little tray for individual wafers to go in where no one touches the wafer that you will take out with your finger. The form we've been doing is called communion by intinction, and I had never heard of that because the church I grew up in did the wafers and the little cups. So when I went to seminary, I learned this idea of intinction, which is dipping the bread in the chalice. You know, some forms of Christian expression actually will have a priest place the bread on your tongue or in your mouth. There are many different expressions of that, but here we've done the dipping deal. And I was pastor my student appointment down at Venus in Maypearl when I learned this, and I went down there and was anxious to try it. I had no idea in my naivete or arrogance, whatever it was, that they had already had student pastors. They knew what communion by intinction was. They didn't like it, but if I wanted to do it and it was new to me, they humored me and never told me that it wasn't new to them. So I thought I was teaching them something. And that day came. I'd had church at Venus that morning from 9 to 10, driven my car down to Maypearl for the 11 o'clock service. We had about 50 people there in this 250-seat, old white frame church, beautiful sanctuary, so that everybody could spread out, talk about social distancing. And over here to my right, the left side of the chancel, but to my right as I stood out, was a young man, great young man, who was about 13 or 14 years old. His name was Jerry. He was from a broken home, had a stepfather and his mother, both that were there. I take it back. It was a single parent situation. His mother was raising him as a single parent, now that I think about it. And he had a girlfriend with him. It was a fairly new relationship, 14 years old, and he had brought her to church. She was seated, as I am, in this chair with my backside on the seat of the chair and my back, or her back, against the pew. But Jerry, showing off at age 14, had his feet on the seat, and he was sitting up on the back of the pew, looking down at her, really trying to impress this young lady. And here I am trying to explain intinction, thinking our people didn't know how it works. Take the bread in the cup of your hand, then move to, it was going to be my lay leader. I was going to hand him the bread, and the lay leader was going to handle the chalice next to me. Take the bread and then move on to our lay leader, Mr. Prophet, and dip the bread in the cup, eat and drink, therefore, simultaneously, and kneel as you wish, just as way you're familiar with doing it here in this church. Well, Jerry wasn't paying any attention to what I was saying, hadn't heard a word I said. And he's been doing this impersonation of an ape or a monkey or a gorilla or something. Had his tongue out. And the little girl was just laughing and what have you. Well, the very first one to come in the communion line, as everybody came across the back of the sanctuary and down the north aisle and all lined up ready, of course, was Jerry. Had no clue hadn't heard a word I said. So I had to kind of repeat it again, and I was a little frustrated. Jerry, take the bread in your hand and then dip it in the juice and move on. His response was to do the ape impersonation for me. But see, Jerry had also popped in 5 or 6 pieces of pink double bubble gum, which he had in his mouth during all of this. Now, I explained it to him. He responds with the ape impersonation, and then I focus on the next person. So I did not see what's about to happen. Unbeknownst to me, my lay leader, who's on my left, holds the cup up, and when little 14-year-old Jerry leans over and looks in to put his bread in, he does the ape impersonation again. And that big mass of bubble gum goes kerplop right into the chalice. Now, the level of juice in a chalice doesn't go all the way to the top, but you have to have it high enough so people don't have to stick their fingers down in there. We had it measured right, but when that mass of bubble gum falls in there, the level of juice rises to the top. And also, unbeknownst to me, my big old lay leader, he's about 280-pound, broad-shouldered old boy, he gets so frustrated by this, he begins to shake. So grape juice is now running down the chalice and dripping onto the floors and the carpets. And I move the line through, and other people have caught on to the fact that something's wrong. I'm oblivious to it. And when it's over, he looks at me with astonished anger and says, "Well, didn't you see what happened?" And I said, "No." And he explains it to me. And he said, "I just knew someone was going to put that bread in and pull that thing out. I hope we never," oh, it's so gross. And it was awful for a minute until you stop and realize how hilarious the whole situation was. Hollywood could not come up with a script any better than that. Does God not smile and laugh? Can we not laugh? Can I not laugh at Mark and laugh at the circumstance? And while that story was an embarrassing mess at the moment, it has provided me delight for all these years since. I never would tell that story in this church, knowing we did communion that way. People would never come back. But now that we've changed it, I can share it with you so you can laugh too. And let's not have any complaints over the new wafers and the cups for all of the reasons, including my funny story. Let laughter work into the tension, the worry, the stress, the fear, the uncertainty, the unknown. Not only this pandemic, but in the stress we bring on ourselves through our materialistic values. And let laughter be that calming, that uniting, that drawing presence that pulls us together and helps us realize we're all in this world together. And love is going to pull us through. And let's not get too carried away with how important we think we are. I thank you for tuning in and for letting us have a little discussion of laughter. And maybe Jesus understood how we felt that day in Maypearl. Blessings.